Letter 3. The morning I chose the cold. Actually, I nearly didn't. There is a moment, just before you get into cold water for the first time, when every reasonable part of your brain asks the same question. Why are you voluntarily doing this? I heard it clearly on the morning of the 1st of March 2023. Standing on the same patio where, 2 years earlier, I had sat in the sunshine, rediscovering what it felt like to simply be present. This time, the weather was rather different. The clear skies and beautiful May temperatures had been replaced by rain, a noticeable bite in the air, and the forecast of snow. But there I was, stood in my swim shorts. The water temperature in the ice tub in front of me was 8 degrees, and my head was saying with considerable conviction, "Neil, you are absolutely crazy." But there was another part of me that knew this was exactly the right thing to do. How I got here. I need to give you a little context because the first plunge didn't begin on the 1st of March. It began several months earlier. I had been following Wim Hof since discovering him on YouTube during the pandemic. And by the autumn of 2022, I was beginning to notice something that I now think of as whole body health. The profound symbiotic relationship between mental and physical well-being. Each one influencing the other in ways that are impossible to fully separate. The breathwork and yoga I'd been practicing consistently were changing both my body and my mind simultaneously. I wanted to understand how far that could go. Part of Wim's preparation for cold water immersion is deceptively simple. At the end of your warm shower each morning, turn the water to cold. Stay in it for as long as you can, and gradually, day by day, extend the time until you can comfortably remain in the cold water for at least 3 minutes. This practice alone has profound effects on your whole body health. There's a lot of truth in Wim's motto. A cold shower a day keeps the doctor away. I started in the autumn, and by December 2022, I had reached the 3 minutes. I was ready. I thought of a perfect Christmas present and ordered an ice tub, and it arrived on the 18th of January. When I tell this story, people often ask, why did I choose the summer to begin my cold water experiments? A valid and sensible question for which I have no answer. Then, almost as if it had been written, Cancer Research announced a sponsored cold water challenge. 1 plunge every day throughout March. This was a charity close to my heart, and I signed up immediately. February became my preparation month. I continued the cold showers each morning, but I also worked on something less tangible, my mindset. I walked through my first plunge in my mind over and over. I visualized every detail, the cold, the gasps, the urge to get out, the moment I would choose to stay. Wim also talks about the horse stance as part of the preparation. A wide-legged squat, isometric and grounding, combined with deep conscious breathing. It generates internal body heat, activates the muscles, and, perhaps most importantly, it builds the mental resilience needed to handle the cold shock effectively. I practiced it on the patio in the February mornings, looking, I'm sure, entirely unusual to anyone who happened to glance over the fence. The morning of the 1st of March. I set up a camera to capture the moment. People had donated generously and I wanted to share it with them. I had an app on my watch, and chose a 15-second countdown, a 3-minute timer, and heart rate tracking. I'll share the incredible results in a future letter. I prepared the ice tub, and I went through the horse stance, breathing deeply, warming myself from the inside out, and then I stood at the edge of the water. I almost got in, and then I changed my mind. Twice. Wim says this is entirely normal. The body's instinct is not to enter cold water. It is a defense mechanism, ancient and powerful, and it does not respond well to being overridden by rational thought. I stood there for a moment, acknowledged what was happening, and pressed the watch again. 15 seconds. Here we go. At 5 seconds, I stepped in. I stood in the water, and it burnt my legs immediately, a sensation that bears very little resemblance to anything I'd expected. I sat down. The gasps were involuntary, and there were many of them in those first 30 seconds, and a significant part of me wanted to get out immediately. Instead, I followed the breath, gently in for 4 counts, gently out for 4. I closed my eyes, and I concentrated on nothing else. And then I noticed the timer said 2 minutes. 1 more minute to go. Something strange happened in that final minute. I began to feel warmth, an odd internal warmth, almost like a slow burn from the inside. And then something stranger still. Calm. Not comfort exactly, not enjoyment, but a deep animal calm. My body had stopped fighting. The 3-minute timer buzzed. I stood up. A rush of warmth flooded through me as I stepped out onto the patio, and I stood there for a moment, not particularly cold, not particularly anything, just profoundly, undeniably present. My hands and feet felt as though they were on fire, and my skin was bright red, the colour of a mild suntan. I grabbed a towel, dried off, and went straight back into the horse stance and the breathing I'd learnt. Then someone handed me a cup of tea. The best tea I've ever tasted. I stood there, on the patio, wrapped in warm clothing, endorphins moving through my body like a slow tide, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. Genuinely, fully alive. And that feeling, that euphoria, stayed with me for hours. Why it works. I have come to understand the cold as one of the most honest teachers I've encountered. It does not care about your intentions. It responds only to what you actually do. Here is what consistent cold water immersion does to the body, and why I believe it belongs in any serious conversation about whole body health. Reduced inflammation and accelerated recovery. Cold water causes blood vessels to constrict, reducing swelling and muscle damage. This is why athletes have used ice baths for decades. But chronic inflammation, that low-grade, persistent kind that underlines so many modern illnesses, also responds to regular cold exposure. I think of this as the body learning to regulate itself again. Enhanced mental well-being. Cold exposure increases levels of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. These are not small increases. Studies have shown dopamine rises by as much as 250% following cold immersion. That euphoria on the patio was not imagination, it was chemistry at work. A stronger immune system. Regular cold exposure has been linked to increased white blood cell count. The body, repeatedly asked to adapt, becomes better at adapting. Remember Wim's motto? Improved cardiovascular health. The cardiovascular system works hard to maintain its core temperature during cold immersion. Over time, this strengthens circulation and helps manage blood pressure. The heart, like any muscle, responds to training. Metabolic activation. Cold exposure activates brown adipose tissue, a type of fat that generates heat by burning energy. And this is one of the reasons you feel warm from the inside during immersion. Your body is working. Lessons from the cold. The science matters, but it's not what I think of when I step into cold water now. What I think about is the moment I almost didn't get in. Cold water immersion is, at its heart, a practice in overriding the part of yourself that says, not yet, not today, this isn't necessary. It is an act of choosing discomfort in service of something more. And what I have found, consistently without exception, is that the capacity to do that in the water transfers to other areas of life. If I can get into cold water at 8 degrees on a March morning, when every instinct is telling me not to, think about what else I can do. That question has quietly changed a great deal in my life. Until next Monday, Neil. Next week, I want to talk about creativity, not as a talent, not as a profession, but as something closer to survival. And I want to tell you about a Saturday afternoon in Guildford that reminded me why.